Hello and welcome to this wonderful panel discussion. We have this eminent panelists, and thank you for the introductions. We're jumping right in, and Shashi, Prashant, Rohit, and Yogesh, looking forward to a wonderful time over the next 40-odd minutes as we move on to this segment of the Sustainability Conclave being attended by so many companies, and I'm really thankful for that. So let's jump right in. And as we said today, the topic which has been published is net zero. But to set the stage, we are just trying to look at a much broader aspect of it. A net zero maybe is one of the pieces, but the biggest picture, of course, is the overall sustainability efforts. As we as a company, the globe in general, and everyone in particular is jumping and embarking into at hopefully the right juncture, and hopefully it's not too late. But today we will have a series of questions that we will discuss and hopefully add more value to it by looking at what companies are doing, what are we expected to do together, and what more can we do together. So with that as the fundamental basis, my first point of discussion is, how are all our companies geared to achieving our net zero goals? Everyone's taking some goal or the other. How are our companies getting ready, right? So just to give you a few nuggets from Intel, one is, of course, taking a goal. So we've taken a 2040 net zero goal, which is clear that if you don't have a goal, you don't go and get it. Then what it means for Intel Scope 3 emissions, right? We're committed to addressing climate change and climate impacts through our upstream and downstream value chain, and also our products, right? Technology and how we can use it to create more sustainable products, whether it is in the PC space or whether it is in our cooling space from the usage of electricity, power, and things like that. So just a few hints into what we are trying to do over a multi-year process to get to that 2040 net zero goal. So I'll start with you, Prashant. Maybe just give us your 2 cents on that and pass the mic around.
Thank you, Manas. So pleasure to be here. So at Intuit, basically, so being a primarily a software company, we achieved our carbon neutrality by 2015 already. A combination of offset efforts as well as conservation efforts. So we achieved our carbon neutrality in 2018. Actually, we went ahead and we reduced our footprint, carbon footprint, by around 40,000 metric tons. The emission footprints. Our goal by 2030 is to do it 50x. Basically, we want to go reduce the carbon emission and carbon footprint by over 2 million metric tons in 2030. So that's our goal. Our effort has been. And in 2020, actually, our goal was in 2030. It was basically we wanted to have 100% renewable electricity in our facilities across the globe. We did that already in 2020. Actually, by April, we were already on 100% renewable energy across the globe, across all the development centers. So these are some of the things. I think I want to hear from everybody else as well.
Okay, let me share some of thoughts on how and what we do here in Dell. Now, as an organization, we consider net zero as one of our extension of our climate change commitments. And we also have something called Moonshot 2030 goals, where we tend to reach by 2050 all of our scopes 1, 2, and 3 done and dusted with net zero. But then at least 50% of it by 2030 itself. And then there are various cascading other goals towards reducing or engaging in 75% source of our electricity in across the globe offices to 100% by 2040 and 75% by 2030. In supply chain, using our direct material suppliers to make sure that all greenhouse gas emissions are reduced to at least 60% of the levels where we started from. And then there are many more to go. So I will not elaborate on too many, but would still like to make a point that we do start with certain moonshot goals, but we still ensure that in this continual journey of how we evaluate and measure our goals, we need to be agile enough to make sure that while we accelerate our progress, we are also making sure that we are reviewing and inserting more if required, All this just to support and benefit some of our customers and stakeholders, always at the helm of it. Thank you. Rohit.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Manas, firstly for introduction and for starting the whole session, and Prashantha and Yogesh, good to hear from you. So when it comes to our operations at Schneider Electric, and not just operations, but the entire value chain. So on a bigger picture, we have, so firstly, recently our net zero emissions were validated by the Science Based Target Initiative as well. And by 2050, we plan or we aspire to have a net zero value chain end to end, which includes all scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. While having said that, we also have intermediary objectives of becoming carbon neutral in our operations by 2025, net zero ready in our operations by 2030, and have a carbon neutral value chain by 2040. So this is like a build up to that 2050 objective that we're talking about. But to mention the fact that when it comes to scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, when it comes to our own operations, the scope 1 and 2 part, it's again energy efficiency, renewable energy, and the transition towards electric vehicles for the corporate fleet or the company fleet. These are the major efforts that are being driven for the operations aspect. But the majority of our emissions sit in scope 3 piece of the company, and that's where we have also initiated some of the efforts. So when it comes to, for example, scope 3 upstream, that is the supplier part, there's a recent project that we started which is called the Zero Carbon Project, and we are targeting top 1,000 of our suppliers across the globe, and we are targeting to reduce 50% of their emissions by 2025. That's one of the pieces that we have started with. And other than that, when it comes to scope 3 downstream, we are continuously trying to make our products more efficient in terms of their own internal consumption. That is there, have products which are coming with a complete circularity approach, also maybe free from SF6 gas and these sort of other things as well. And maybe just one more point I will add, there's a sort of a unique thing that we are also doing. So these days, I'm sure you would have all heard of scope 4 emissions as a new concept as well. So we have also taken an ambition to help through our solutions, offerings, products to the customers. We want to have help them save and avoid 800 million tons of CO2 emissions by 2025. So that's another aspect that we have added to the overall climate emission that we have. So yeah, that's an overview piece of the same. Shashi, please.
Yeah, thank you. We are a very small organization. We're consulting and we're helping other organizations accelerate their net zero journeys faster. So we have a very clear fourfold approach here that get to the climate neutral now. We don't have time to, kind of think about getting your own operations till 2030 or 40. So our push is always towards climate neutral now. And then this, which is operations. And then the next step, it is a hierarchical approach. And the next step is supply chain, your value chain, your entire value chain. So for that also, you have to start measuring right now. And along with that, of course, your product, what most organizations think that it's the operation, but what about your product really? You've mentioned, Rohit, very clearly about, many a time there's the product emissions which surpass all other emissions. So we can't really put that out of the window and then we say, yeah, we're doing it here. And then the third thing is that we have to go beyond our value chain also. And then lastly, whatever is left, we may have to offset. So this is the approach that we intend to use with all customers. And there are different stages of absorbing this information. Thank you.
That was great and a great start, I must say. So Shashi, stay on that thought. And I would wanted to kind of address this question to you, given the consultancy status that you have and the advice that you're giving to a lot of companies. So what are some of the key trends that you're seeing in the quest to net zero?
I think the biggest change that we have seen is one is the task force on climate financial disclosures, which is driving, the trends on net zero. The second is the science-based target initiative, which is, of course, it is aligned with the CDP, which people were doing from last 2 decades in at a very slow pace initially, but now it's really picking up. So the trend is to understand that what we are doing is science based, and it is aligned to which model. For example, 1.5 degree or well below 2 degree or 2 degrees. So what the push is to understand the climate models in a manner that what is your context and what are going to be the repercussions on you. So it is not only mitigating. So the global firms are driving the net zero agenda, which is great, which is about mitigation, but what we are also missing out on the adaptation part. And I think there's somewhere the Task Force on Climate Financial Disclosure is bringing it to the top of the agenda, that we want to know what physical risks do you face, right? So I think the trend is toward analyzing both kind of climate risk transition and physical risks simultaneously, and attending to those and having plans for mitigating those risks. And I think every organization, however large it is, it has to look at, for each country, geography, your own physical risks. So transition is decided globally, but physical, you have to take charge of yourself in your own locations. So I think that is where the trend is going to go. And with so many climate disasters across the world, we can't just be focused on mitigating. We have to be equally, equipped to handle the repercussions that we are facing anywhere. So I can see that with the TCFD and SBTI, the focus on understanding the whole big picture of climate change is the trend. So in SBTI, I think last year we had about 1,000 companies pledge. I think Schneider, Intuit, they have already pledged, right? 1.5 degrees to 1.5 degrees, perhaps, yeah. Right. So and so many, and within 1 year, I have seen maybe more than 600, 700 companies, more companies, they have pledged to similar targets. So I can see that that's the trend, to say I pledge and I work on it and showcase what you can do, and then continue to do. But what is the missing piece really, which I wish is a trend, and you haven't asked me that question, is is it about the focus on the product?
Perfect. So accept the problem, measure the problem, know what your risks are, and then embed them into your processes too, so that your products are directly affected. So thank you. That's a great insight into the trends. Moving on, and this would be, please come in and share all your inputs on this. So we're talking so much about net zero, we're talking so much about climate change. So what are the challenges that we see, with achieving net zero, and what are we doing about them, right? So who wants to take it? Go ahead.
Maybe I'll start here. Generically, in most organizations, it is a start which is the problem, not knowing where to start. We want to do it, but just don't know what to do it. Now, but gradually more and more companies are recognizing the need for sustainability to not be just a tick of the green box, and are now getting more and more knowledgeable or appraised towards the fact of identifying that where they can improve their sustainability and business performance by just doing that. But the smaller companies still have some challenges. And a good place to start is to at least start to explore that, can they do something about reducing, or how can they consume less of their resources? And the likely immediate incentive they get out of it is some kind of cost reduction, which is all of us want.
Got it.
I would just echo what Yogesh was. Sorry, yes, Prashant, please.
Go ahead, Rohit. Finish your thoughts.
So I would exactly echo what Yogesh has highlighted, and I'll also slightly detail it out a little bit in a very brief way. So if we see today, let's talk about the emissions, the global emissions which are there. Around 70% of those emissions are coming with the aspect of energy, either use or generation, but 70% approximately are focused on that particular aspect. Now, if we see three things to make that or to go towards a net zero aspect, it's efficiency, energy efficiency, it's use of renewables, and it's electrification with, let's say, low or zero carbon sources. Now, one of the challenges that I've seen, and that this comes in with, let's say, maybe the awareness aspect as well, but we have always related net zero with, using alternative fuels or, let's say, renewable energy sources. what we see is that demand side decarbonization is actually the thing which will hold the key, not the supply side decarbonization of energy actually. So it's basically the whole aspect of energy efficiency along with electrification, with, let's say, a decarbonized energy supply in conjunction to that is the solution that's going to happen. And that's where the whole aspect of technology, whether it's the electrification piece or energy efficiency, which is enabled by technologies like digitization, comes into picture as well. And that's where the whole awareness part is also a very important piece that comes in. And I think that's where I would say more than challenge, it's like an opportunity where we can do a lot. It's a potential opportunity. So I think that's where the whole piece we should be focusing on, because there is immense amount of potential tapped in these areas of energy efficiency that we are still not realized. So I think that's one of the things that I would want to put in.
Yeah, very true, right? Like, and also building upon what Yogesh was saying, right? So the main challenge I see is like at Intuit we see is scaling this, right? So yeah, we achieve carbon neutrality. How do you scale? There are lots of like around the world, like about 50% of the businesses are small businesses. Like these are like self-employed, family businesses, run by individuals, small flower shops and all. They want to have get into sustainable practices as well. But then the gap is in when we achieve something, spreading that word and making sure that it is practically adoptable, right? So that's where what Intuit is doing is we work with small businesses a lot. More than 70% of our customers are small business customers. So we use very sophisticated AI-driven algorithms and everything in order to build the features in the product itself. For instance, QuickBooks Advanced product, for instance, right? There we build sophisticated algorithms to suggest sustainable options. Like for instance, how you pack your shipping container also matters, right? Even a small bit matters. To all the way to how can you subscribe to renewable energy? Where are the sources? How can we connect you there? And also, sustainability makes good business decision, not just good karma, right? So this is something that we are bringing to the customers, and this is where we are able to scale our message. It's a journey. We are not there completely, but it's a journey. Or for instance, some business wants to certify themselves, with Energy Star or any kind of sustainability certification, right? We can help them, so with their practices and all. So this is how we are trying to scale it. I think the biggest problem with any intent like this or any movement like this is scaling it and making sure that the like-minded people around the world connect to it, right? So this is where we are spending our efforts right now from Intuit side.
I would just want to barge in here to say I understand completely and completely agree with you. The challenges that we face similar challenges through our clients. However, at the conceptual level, the real barrier for net zero is lack of long-term thinking. We are so our economic model is so much obsessed with the quarter-on-quarter, goals and economic. I'm sorry, but it is
the
a whole
return of investment, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's like quarter on quarter, and as long as we are thinking quarter on quarter, we cannot go towards. We're talking about say year 2100, right? So if we have to bring clarity to year 2100, where some of the children who are born now will be alive, right? So if we have to talk about their lifetime, we have to stretch our thinking to long-term thinking. And I think that's the real challenge at the concept level.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Especially for just a counterpoint on the Shashi, the quarter-on-quarter thing, right? As we work with small businesses, for them, sustaining themselves also is important, right? If we tie their business goals along with the sustainability goals, that's the sweet spot, at least in the short run for them. Then they can become the advocates of the sustainability to their customers as well, right? For instance, some of our customers, they ask us, like, can you, like, during checkout, like, we introduced a feature in QuickBooks saying that during checkout, we can offer them sustainable choices of shipping, for instance, right? I'm okay to ship, like, I'm okay to get my products, like, a week later, but I want to go do my bit to the environment, right? So those are some of the options. Yeah, but I agree with you. A very incremental thinking will not get us there. But some of the smaller businesses, they are especially because of the pandemic, right? So they are kind of crunched to think like that right now. That's where the scalability and mind shift change comes into picture.
Great inputs to this. Thank you, everyone. So yeah, that sweet spot is what we are narrowing down on, right? One, getting out of, especially large corporations, getting out of the quarter-on-quarter mindset, whereas supporting the small organizations to get into the same, stream and process. In some ways, mixing that up could potentially help, solve all the broad challenges that you spoke about. Thank you. Moving on, right? So there are two pieces, right? When we are here together as a combine, as an industry ecosystem, and then there are the regulators, which is the government. So what do you expect from both the industry platform and the regulator in this regard?
Okay,
so I'll just maybe build on to the last, I think, the discussion that we were doing. So like what Shashi, Prashantha very rightly mentioned about the small businesses, piece. I would just, put it with our own experience and the perspective. Even if I talk about our own, supply chain piece, maximum of scope 3 upstream, the supply chain part is basically your small MSMEs from where you're getting components, because it's, it's majorly that piece which is coming in. And in India, if we see 1/3 of our manufacturing output is coming to MSME segment. So I think that's where maybe the government can make certain policies. There can be certain push. We see that, I'm sure everyone would have heard about the PAT scheme, which is about the industrial energy efficiency improvement aspect. Now, while we have that for the larger energy intensive sectors, I think there can be certain things for an MSME segment as well, which will make them or which will push them to strive towards a more efficient operation, a more sustainable operation in that way. It can either be in form of certain incentives, it can either be in form of certain policy push as well. So all these things, I think, can come into picture. A very small example can be like, let's say, talking about a very simple standard like ISO 50001. How about helping MSMEs to adhere to these sort of standards, which will help them in thinking what exactly Shashi was saying, not just about quarter and quarter, but it will help them think about the complete life cycle approach of their operations. So something on those lines, I think, is where the government can, although there are things happening. I mean, we have improved a lot from past, how the policy push and everything is being there. But I think this is the direction where it can further go in, and even new technologies. So like, for example, we're talking about hard to abate sectors like steel or like cement. And there, if you talk about, technologies like green hydrogen or carbon capture and utilization and storage, making a roadmap around these lines from a government point of view, we see a lot of push happening on green hydrogen in the recent times. I think these are all positive signs. And if we, at the end, if we make it happen on ground as well, not just from a very high level point of view, I think these are very positive signs from, that we can get from regulators or policymakers.
And Shashi, you were saying something.
I was just saying that the regulatory position on say renewable energy versus then first incentivizing and then kind of killing that incentive also in form of say under 1 megawatt, especially what you just said, Rohit, and Prashant, you also mentioned about the MSMEs. Their real concern is that some of the companies that we are aware of have gone from being 100% renewable to not, because they were consuming less than 1 megawatt. So to be specific, such kind of contradictory policies kind of take away the momentum, and there are mission to either work for the brand or tell them that they can be the preferred suppliers by being renewable, but then something just gets snatched under the carpet. So I wish that we're progressive on that. And the second, I think at the industry level, if we could see more collaboration for the collective power of, say, for example, an SEZ to have a power purchase agreement, I would say that, that kind of collaboration is what is going to cut ice really in the long run. Not your individual companies pitching for, your own PPAs or for renewable. I really wish that the entire industrial cluster moves forward and can declare themselves as renewable. So I would really want to see that kind of collaboration.
And you said it, right? There have been umpteen examples where when we join hands and get together, the power of the collective is way more than the power of the individual units trying. Though the cause is the same, sometimes the steps that we take either are disoriented or the goals are disjoint, due to which, we put our own efforts in paid by not joining hands. And this is a classic case where we can get into a common platform, rally ourselves together and move in one direction. Prashant, any thoughts that you had on this?
Yeah, I was thinking so when we look at something like this, right? So where it is a mass movement kind of, this thing, we always look towards governments, because they are the most powerful bodies that can bring in change. The other most powerful, another side of the powerful aspect is people, right? Basically, Shashi, you were talking about 2100 goals, most of our kids, right? So it's also education, right? So I think education is today's education has to be more sustainable as well, even including for instance at Intuit we use our books and everything made out of recycled fiber and things like that. Maybe our education system should include that, right? They should have more sustainable practices already followed in the schools, so that our kids grow up with that. When they come home, they become the ambassadors of the change. And they are the ones who are going to be very active by 2030 or 2040 or 2050, right? Whenever we want to see the results. I think the other sector I'm thinking will definitely benefit the overall generation is education across the board, right? So yeah, that's my thought process.
Very nice. So good. Let's just move perspectives now and get to where net zero is right? Supply chain, right? So what are you folks doing from the supply chain perspective, and how is it kind of yielding results in some way?
Yeah, see, optimistically speaking, supply chain has embedded a complete product life cycle. There is opportunity to get engaged and contribute. If I start with right from a design stage where you explore what material to be used, the new product introduction stage, there is where right decisions are made, the longevity of the product, the repairability of the product, the reusability of the product, the sourcing of the eco-friendly suppliers and the recyclable packaging. All those decisions are made at the design and sourcing stage. So those are crucial. We then get on to the next stage of supply chain, getting into manufacturing. And yes, if we embrace a production processes which conserve energy and prevent pollution, nothing like that. Go next, get into distribution. Your logistics network, are we using, not so much as of now, but EVs, electric vehicles? Are we at least doing our bit to do some route planning to make sure that we are not wasting too much of energy? I think something can be done here. Finally, even after the product is sold, there is a last stage to which is the aftermarket services. Ties back to how you designed it and also goes extended to the fact that many governments are coming up with right to repair, which actually means that why do we dump, why do we make electronic waste if there is opportunity to reuse, recycle majority of it? So do we have our reverse logistics and our repairability, recyclability tuned enough to make sure that together all of this combined together and help in somewhat a word called circular economy, if I may use here?
Completely agree with Yogesh on that. I have absolutely similar thoughts on, I think if it is not circular, we can't really, we can endlessly say that, you have improved your scope 1 and scope 2, But when again you start the cycle from the virgin material, there is where we have the gap. So even for something like a chip, if I may say, I don't know very much about these things, but specifically I would say that if we were to start from silicon recycled, I'm sure there's a 50% advantage minimum. As for and similarly for plastic, similarly for metal used in the and for any electrical equipment also in the same manner. So I think the real thing, what Yogesh said, that's the main emphasis. I think the supply chains don't improve if we don't build the secondary miners, the ecosystem of secondary mining, and also facilitating, this ecosystem in whichever way one can. Thank you.
Yeah, totally love the perspective, Yogesh, you brought in. Basically, not only think about supply in, but also reverse. I would call it as duplex supply chain, right? So, going out and coming in both, right? So, yeah, very, very, I love that that overall perspective you are bringing in. So, in software, as we say, right, that the cost of the defect goes up exponentially as it goes later in the stages. Exactly as you said. At the design stage, if we don't make the sustainable choices, and what is our bar for sustainability, then later it becomes, it just exponentially grows, right? It exponentially becomes more and more expensive. Yeah, that's my perspective. I'm just drawing parallels between software and the design that you talked about in the supply chain. Exactly same analogies there. I think that's where everything starts. Thank you for that perspective.
Perfect. So look at the end-to-end process, catch it early, some of those nuggets that came out. And yeah, Shashi, thanks for saying silicon, because that's up my path completely. So yeah, absolutely. So analyze every bit of it. But also, if I may add, is get all the suppliers onto the same platforms that we are talking about, right? Not assuming that everybody understands the whole story as we at least profess to understand. Get them into that same platform. Get them into the same rally cry, keep them as partners as we always have through, and then similar goals that we take, urge them to pick those and then move together. That's the parting shot I would add on this one. Moving on, and thank you for all your perspectives, lovely ones. So part of technology, right, in achieving net zero. So I did touch upon Intel and how we are looking at, more sustainable products or PC products, breaking it down into its parts, whether it's the motherboard, whether it is the silicon, and seeing how we can make, more sustainable. The whole reuse and the reverse logistics piece, which, Yogesh brought about earlier, how do we enable that to our technology processes? The cooling piece, which I spoke about, data centers, consuming such huge powers, and every one of your companies is large data centers, and how do we kind of affect that? We have had some breakthrough research on the air conditioning front in terms of looking at liquid immersion cooling and seeing how those can affect it. So how does technology play a role in this, in your respective areas from the product development or even your functioning perspective?
So yeah, I would say it's actually technology, and maybe supported by some new and innovative business models, I think is going to the centerpiece for achieving net zero ambitions for any, let's say, you can say maybe a company or maybe even a region or anything like that. I think technology is the central piece to all of those things. As I think I was also mentioning or touched upon a little bit in one of the previous places, when it comes to technology, specifically digital piece of it, the digital technology piece of it, actually is going to be, something which would be like an enabler of various technologies. So within the technology piece also, it's going to be a central stage that will be taken by digitization, which will enable other technologies to maybe take out the maximum potential out of them as well. So maybe just a very small example, if I put in a typical commercial building enabled by, let's say, digitization is, and I'm giving it from an Indian perspective through some of the government sources as well, that a best-in-class commercial building is 75% more efficient and sustainable than a business as usual or an average building. So, and that is what we're talking about, the power of technology or the power of digital or the digital world that in that particular case. Similarly, for, let's say, a steel plant, or let's say something like a commercial, healthcare center or a hotel, 30 to 50% is what generally the gap will be between a business as usual one and a best-in-class facility. So this is what we are talking about as the power of technology in all those particular cases. That one, and I think one of the previous responses, we also were talking about the power of measuring, because that's where the whole aspect of monitoring also comes into picture when it comes to specifically the operational part. So measurement, monitoring, managing the operations, enabled through technology, enabled through digitization. I think that's going to be the centerpiece of making our operations more efficient, more sustainable, even more decarbonized in the coming time as well. So yeah, that's where the whole power of data and technology lies.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you, Rohit. We hear words like industrial IoT, smart cities, building management, use of carbon capture systems. And this is all happening around us in our age and time. All we need is probably a parallel, strong infrastructure that caters to it. Also, just picking from where you stopped, we cannot improve it until we measure it. And that's why it's really important that we have a technology that helps us with the much needed data integrity. And that has to really become a culture for us to aspire and probably to improve as well when we measure correctly. So those would be my 2 cents here.
Yeah, technology as well, in my view, it also brings a lot of, see, for instance, when we measure our health, right? So we use technology, right? So then this is exactly when we talk about sustainability, we are talking about the health of Mother Earth, basically, right? So in my view, technology makes sure that it is all in front of you to see it, right? It is the one that sets the goal and then drives the overall awareness and actions behind it. So that way, technology, maybe our ancestors, you take ancient civilizations, they lived the sustainability was the core of their lifestyle. But today's our lifestyle has become too much dependent on technology. That's the reason why it plays a very, very critical role in order to take us back to the sustainable living style, lifestyles as well. So you name it, so I think Yogesh and Rohit, you covered most of the aspects. I just want to add that health aspect to the overall analogy. That's all. Yeah, thank you.
So measure and make by design what was by default, right? Maybe turn the clock back a little bit in that regard. Wonderful. Great input. So we're moving on, right? And now I'm getting onto the softer side a little bit, right? One is strategy, right? Every strategy is a much bandied word, but definitely there has to be a strategic approach to this whole thing, right? It's not something that we are baking one little thing and then once it's baked, the oven is ready and then you take it out and start eating it. It's not going to be as simple as that. So what have you done to your, and let's take the overall sustainability piece, right? And look at what have been your strategic elements, right? As we move on. Like in Intel, what we did is, at least at the first, we said we'll piece together everything that we have and see where we are. As you rightly said, Prashant, if you don't measure it, and Rohit, you said, and Yogesh, you agreed that if you don't measure it, you will not know it. So we started doing that. We said, okay, put everything on one platform and see. Then take incremental goals on each one of them, and that could be the other strategic element to do it. Then add, more vectors, right? Like if you have energy, if you have water, you have supply chain, you have products, you have your people, and you have the ecosystem. So start measuring and taking some goals around it and making it happen. So that's the kind of strategy, a loose build strategy that we have created for Intel as we are moving in this quest towards some goals that are physical goals that we have taken. So other thoughts around strategy as you put your missions on the sustainability front together?
Okay, so I'll give some idea from a Schneider Electric perspective on that how we are doing onto those particular pieces. So you very rightly mentioned, Manas, it has to start with the measuring aspect. in terms of what those things are. So this is exactly what we did. If I divide the strategy it will be basically in 3 buckets. One is the measurement aspect. Second will be, it has to be a top-driven agenda. It cannot go from a bottom-to-top approach. It has to be a top-to-bottom approach when it comes to sustainability. And third is making people accountable for those things. So I think these 3, and I'll just maybe elaborate a little bit on all 3. So for example, measuring performance, in 2005, we started a composite dashboard for sustainability for Schneider Electric, which encompasses all 3 dimensions of sustainability, which we also called as ESG, environmental, social, and governance, or in other words, PPP, planet, profit, and people. So in 2005, we started that particular aspect. At that time, it was called Planet and Society Barometer. And in 2018, we renamed it as Schneider Sustainability Impact. It's basically our group's sustainability transformation plan. We every 3 to 5 years, we renew it with new indicators, new action points, and the target to achieve that we have to achieve on that. And every quarter, we publish it to the external world with an update of where we are in terms of performance. So that's the holistic measurement piece that is going on at that end. Second, as I was mentioning, it has to be a top-driven agenda. So the sustainability scorecard that we have every quarter, it is published as group's non-financial results, and they're presented in an integrated manner with our financial information as well at the global level. So our CEO, global CEO, will announce the sustainability results at the annual investor summit, as well as at the half-year performance piece. And the first and third quarter will be done by our group CFO. So that makes it a top-driven sort of approach as well. And lastly, making people accountable. So the scorecard or the performance of our sustainability program is part of the variable compensation of all our global functions, global leaders. Their variable pay is based on that particular piece. And to give you a number, it's close to 50,000 employees in the company. Their pay depends upon our sustainability performance. So that's the kind of accountability that you drive in those cases as well. So just a very brief snapshot of how things move forward when it comes to our perspective.
Awesome. Those are great perspectives, and how time flies. So maybe we are coming to the end of our this brilliant discussion. I wish it would go on and on, right? I could keep talking all through the day, but we have to look at time. So I will pass the mic around on some parting shots. Your last line on anything that you want to speak about connected to net zero sustainability elsewhere. So Yogesh, I see you on. Go ahead.
I would start by really encouraging forums like this one, because a lot of knowledge that companies do not see as a competitive intellectual property that can really be shared across, and that can bring across great advancement and collaboration, which some of us may be lacking because we don't really see the backside of things. And this, I'm sure all organizations would agree to be morally, ethically correct, and could be a win-win for both the organization and its relevant stakeholders too.
Shashi? Maybe you're on mute.
You're mute.
Seeing sustainability as an advantage, as opposed to doing some good around sustainability. And then focusing on sustainable procurement, that's the power of purchase. I think these are my 2 pointers that I think that can considerably shift the ecosystems.
Prashant?
Yeah, no, building up on Shashi's thought process, I think sustainability is not just good karma, right? So it's a good investment actually, which will pay off, in longer duration. So it's a good business sense. It can make a lot of difference between a long vision, a longer duration vision versus a short-term gain. Yeah, that's where I would conclude my thoughts.
Rohit?
Yeah, so completely agree with all three, Shashi, Prashantha, Yogesh here. And just two things. One, there cannot be, when you talk about climate change or sustainability, there cannot be arbitrage between human progress and climate change mitigation or sustainability in that way. As a matter of fact, there won't be any sustainability or climate change mitigation if it doesn't build on human progress. So I think that's one thing. And the last thing is, I think, as Shashi mentioned and Prashantha was saying, sustainability has to evolve from just a good to do thing to a good to do thing to grow business profitably as well. So I think that's where I'll also put my words.
So we get away with a comfort feeling that we are not doing something to trade our business off, but we're doing something to support our business. Thank you, Shashi. Thank you, Prashant. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Yogesh, for this wonderful talk and wonderful time. All have a good day. And thank you to all the participants for listening to us. Bye and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Manas. Fantastic moderation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.